Hi everyone, thank you again for joining us for another conversation with candidates. And today we have Greg Meyers running for District C, just having a candid conversation on animal welfare.
Rob, Shelby, thank you so much for having me here.
Thanks for coming.
It's a tremendous honor.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, so we know that you are big with the HISD, and education is one of your biggest platforms. And one of the things we were discussing beforehand was how can we get the conversation started in schools, right? For our elementary schools and they're on board. How can we get, just education going for animal welfare?
Sure. So let me say, used to be on HIC. So distance from what's going on now. But, tremendous passion, around youth, around education, and what it means to how to break certain cycles as it relates to some of the pertinent issues in the city. So, this is an issue that, definitely revolves around quality of life issues. It's a safety issue. And I think the biggest piece that we need to do is have a multi-pronged approach to this issue. Now, obviously, there's spay-neutering, there's microchipping, but there's also education. And, I think the biggest area and probably the lowest hanging fruit is to go into some of our schools and really start educating these students about what safe and responsible pet ownership means. So as they matriculate through their age, they begin to see the appropriateness, the responsibility that comes along with owning a pet. And I think that is something that we're not doing, but it's something that I want to bring as part of this multi-pronged approach to literally solving this issue.
And I know there's a lot of organizations that already kind of do that now, where they go into schools and speak. Citizens for Houston Strays does that, and Houston Pets is starting to do that, so
Right.
which is great. Right. And we really want to see if we can get the nonprofits involved with this as well, not just the city, because they already have a lot of experience in the field, and for the most part, they know the different facets that combine animal welfare. Is there a way to do that?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it all depends on the capital of how many people we can come in and really start making a difference. I think if you take it in small segments, I think there's opportunities, and I think schools and educational entities would be tremendously willing to do that. When you look at a study the University of Texas did years ago. Now, this is an Aggie, so I'm citing a UT study, but my daughter goes to UT. But UT actually cited in terms of a quality of life issue that stray animals was above crime. 37% of the people said that is one of the most pertinent and driving issues over crime. And that's something,
shocking.
It is. We hear and we see graphic images on TV about violent crimes, about the criminal activities. We all also want to make sure that our neighborhoods are safe. But part of that is making sure that we have responsibility in terms of quality of life issue. This is an issue that is plaguing Houston in a very big way.
Yeah.
So tell us about next year. What's going to be different as far as City Hall and the budgeting? How's that?
Yeah, so when we started, one of the things that we said from the very beginning, we know we have critical issues facing the city. Obviously the issue with strays and how we deal with that, flood mitigation in areas that are just plaguing the city over and over and over. Like Meyerland, not once but 3 times, before any kind of action was taken. And then we have public safety and infrastructure that are critical issues that are really plaguing this. But there's only one thing we can do to ensure that we mitigate some of these areas and really kind of curtail it, and that's focusing on the budget. We've seen over the last 3 cycles of city council that council has passed each year of those 3 years unstructured budgets. That means they're not balancing their budget in a fiscal manner. They're pulling from fund balance. And we saw a report from our city controller saying we're at a critical level. And it's literally just confirmed exactly what we're saying, that unless we focus on this, we're going to have some serious issues. When I was board president in HISD in 2010, we were faced with a $100 million deficit. And if you remember, that's the year where the tax rate got compressed. Great for homeowners, tough on education. It sucked out over $5 billion, right, of educational dollars. So the superintendent at the time, he goes, "Oh my gosh, Greg, we're going to have to raise taxes, we're going to have to cut services, and we're going to have to let people go." And I said, no, no, and no. I said, this is a time we can stand up and really try something unique and bring a business approach to try to solve this and play this. So we looked, we did a true hiring freeze. We looked at duplicity of services. At the time, we had about 3 different departments that were doing similar things, merged them into one and had people apply. And more importantly, educated the department heads on what it meant, not just to cut a budget by X percent, 3%, pick a number, 5%, whatever, but starting at ground zero, and I'm simplifying this, but starting at zero and making sure that they're accountable for every single one of our tax dollars, and making sure that it's spent in an appropriate way and targeted way, to really make some good outcomes. And we did that. Now, did I think we can do it in 1 year? No, but we did it. And those are some of the things we want to bring to the city.
And to BARC especially.
To BARC, and,
Yeah.
Sheldon, the one thing, and I'm sure you guys hear it all the time, is the city's excuse is saying we have no money to do
Yes.
these issues.
When we go down to City Hall and we say, one of the last times we went, they were cutting off intake days,
Right.
complete intake days, so they would not take any animals. Mayor Turner's response was, oh, well, we've had budget cuts, we have no money, we have no money.
Right.
This is a solution. We're trying to tie in how this is so relevant to,
Right.
what we face as, animal rescuers.
Yeah, and
everything.
it comes down to, obviously, even as individuals, right? We have limited budgets. The city has limited budget. But when you see, and when the voters see and continue to see that revenues continue to increase in the city, yet they keep saying that there's no money. And I understand about costs going up, but you also see some of these issues that aren't being, or some of these dollars that aren't being spent on the critical issues facing the city. So I think as a community, we need to come together, and really start saying, level set this. What are the priorities around core services then that we need to focus on to become a world-class city? I love the city. I mean, the last thing I want it to be is like another urban, and I was about to mention some cities, and I won't do that, but other urban cities that have really been shackled and plagued with some, basically gone bankrupt. I don't want this city to be that way. I mean, we have too much going for us. We're at a precipice, and we're growing. We need to look at smart growth. We need to make sure that we tackle these critical problems, because if we don't, we're not going to become that world-class city that we want to become.
And then with the whole issue with BARC, a lot of people were saying if we can increase the funding, say to get more animal control officers, or just increase to 7 days a week, for intake. But as you were saying with the budget, how can a council member, work with the city in order to actually review the budget? Like, what are the challenges you're going to face with that?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to asking questions, and I did that each and every day. And there's a way to do that. If you sit back and don't ask questions, you're never going to get answers.
Yeah,
Right?
which is what currently is.
Which is what currently is, and that's unfortunate. And I'm a budget guy. Currently I'm a CFO. I had a company. I mean, that's my life is literally digging through this, and then you ask questions, and it's not done in a disrespectful way to where you then create alienation, but you do it in a way to really begin to understand. And it's also a way to help build coalitions as well. When you start questioning, when you start peeling away the onion to try to see where are these resources going? Why are they doing that? I think it truly does. Then you have others that come on board saying, yeah, I want to learn about this too. And why aren't we spending money on more microchipping, more spay neutering, more intake hours? Because we need to do that as well.
Yeah.
We need to look at laws, that will strengthen penalties, like Colorado. I mean, I'm very proud of Colorado. It's unfortunate the Senate bill didn't pass this legislation, but I will be there as well. My track record wasn't just being an HISD board member, sitting down here and passing policies on HISD. It was literally also going to Austin and Washington to make sure that we actually have positive effects for kids. And I'll do the same thing in the city, knock on those doors in Austin to make sure that we advocate for things that really do affect Houston and our way of life.
So in your PetSet survey, you said that you would be in favor of banning sales from backyard breeders and puppy mills?
Absolutely.
In the city?
Absolutely.
Right.
I mean, we need to make sure there's reputable farms, there's enough animals that, we have that are available for folks to go and adopt. And we need to do it in a way that we can get control. And my feeling is if people aren't adopting those, you begin to wonder, is that another piece of where some of the dumping occurs from these types of entities? And I'll stand up and make sure that we at least take these measures and at least close some of these, because we've got to take some action. I mean, doing what we're doing now, this inaction, is perpetuating the issue.
Yeah.
And I'm tired of the conversations without inaction. I had an opportunity to also go to the Houston Humane Society. And one of the questions that I asked is, have we ever pulled together, some of the wonderful nonprofits, like you guys, like Animal Justice League, like Houston PetSet, and they go, yeah, we've pulled things together. The city agreed to that, and they actually hired a consultant, spent almost $1 million never implemented one thing.
Really?
That's one example of inactivity. Again, I'm tired of the talk. Now it's time for folks to elect leaders that's willing to really stand up and do what's right for our community.
One of the things we always go back to that Robert Fisher kind of coined is hope is not a solution. Hope is not a plan, and
Sure, exactly.
we were down at City Hall speaking, and, we laid out all these different issues, and Mayor kind of responds, well, we know we've got a problem. We hope it doesn't get worse. And that perfectly sums up what you're saying is, we can't just continue to hope it doesn't get worse and, acknowledge that there's a problem and just continue the cycle, or we're just going to be, 4 years from now, we'll be exactly where we are right now.
And, there's hope it doesn't get worse in terms of replacements for garbage trucks. Hope it doesn't get worse in terms of, the condition of our fire department's equipment. There is no strategic plan, in this city, guiding this city towards some of these issues. And we did that, in HSD, and again, when I was board president, we put together a strategic plan. Every single thing that we did revolved around kids. Now, we didn't do it in isolation. We went to every corner of the city. So I think that is, again, something I want to do. When I said, we as a community need to come together to determine what it is, that we truly believe are the core critical issues facing the city. I don't think we're going to be far away from really agreeing on some of these. So, as it relates to the efforts that you guys are doing, clearly quality of life is huge. When you see kids that are scared to go out in their front yards and play because they're plagued with stray animals, when you see stray animals that are being treated inhumanely, or any kind of animal being treated inhumanely, that should be a call for action, and it's not. And that's something that I really want to help bring to the forefront and be a partner with you all, as well as the other groups in Houston.
Yeah, that'd be great if you can, increase penalties for cruelty cases and
Absolutely.
We should ask, what about the cruelty registry? So we talked to Tony Busby about the possibility of having a cruelty registry. Would you be in favor of that?
Yeah, and it didn't, no pun intended, it didn't register, but absolutely. And I think that's a great idea. We have that, with other crimes and other violent crimes.
It only makes sense.
There's no excuse. And, when you have somebody that actually goes in to try to adopt another animal, to be able to then pull up somebody that has a history of that would be a tremendous thing. And I know you guys know folks that have actually had some serious incidents and activity of, cruelty to animals. It's linked to other crimes as well.
It goes to children.
And we all know that. So,
And then you have the rescue community who's the best at digging up evidence.
Absolutely.
We're great at that, yeah.
Absolutely.
We did recently, there was 13, I think it was 13 arrests, is that
Yes.
right? There were 13 arrests for different animal cruelty crimes across Harris County, and we went back and ran the criminal record for all these different people. And it was so interesting because there was assault with a deadly weapon. There was, and I'm not talking about minor crimes, not, they, had a possession of marijuana in 1992. It's a very documented history of violent crimes, and it was so funny because we're thinking, okay, you've got this history of crimes with humans. It's probably been back and forth between humans and animals all this time. Or if it's their first offense, it's going to turn into something to where it's...
Absolutely. And, and I mentioned earlier that I had the opportunity to go to the Houston Humane Society. So one of the things, they took me out to the shed or the barn in the back, and FBI had literally just confiscated hundreds of a cockfighting ring, and clearly linked to other illegal activity.
Yeah, where that's happening, there's a ton of other...
Right. So, we need to be diligent, and, the city needs to understand that this is now a call for action.
And then along with that, we can get judges who are, well-versed in animal welfare, not just people who don't really care, right?
We
don't
talked
have the
about
passion for it.
specifics.
Yeah,
Yeah,
specific.
having a specific judge, because if there's, specific judges for like Veterans Court or something, it makes sense to us to have a judge that was knowledgeable in what is, something where they just need a better education as far as how to care for an animal versus something that's going to be a repeated offense.
And I think that would be a great idea, as we move towards hopefully really strengthening some of these laws against folks that are really take some opportunities to really impact negatively our animal population, to make sure that we educate and build that capacity with our judges as well.
Yeah. So one of the things we haven't asked before is, and that I'm hoping that people take away from this, is that there's not a lot of literature out for the Hispanic community. I feel like that's one of the biggest issues we have, just because they don't know that there's resources in place, Is there any way we can help with that?
Absolutely, and when I said talking about making sure that one of those prongs to really stem this issue is education and information, right? So it needs to be in Spanish, it needs to be in Vietnamese, potentially Chinese. I mean, those are some of the big areas, and we need to make sure that we're very diligent in our communities. And we know that certain areas have pockets, much larger
And it would be
pockets
much
of this
easier.
homelessness.
Yeah.
But even just going beyond that, how can we create more advocates? Because I guarantee you there'll be others like us, that will come to the rescue and say, I don't want to do any more of this. I don't want to see any more of this. What can I do to help?
Yeah.
And the more that we provide that information, the more that we bring this up, I think you're going to have more folks that will really come in and volunteer and help and advocate, and literally then make sure that the city is held accountable.
So have you heard about the SB 295?
Yes.
So I'm assuming everything with that you'd be able to back us up with, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
City version of it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
city
And there should be a city, and I'll be one to literally raise my hand and start making sure an advocate. Obviously, we live in a strong mayoral form of government here, but again, one person can start having conversations, right? And then hopefully it trickles, in a way that you articulate that this is a quality of life, this is a safety issue, this is a humane issue, that why we need to do this, and it's a criminal issue. Dogs, cats, turtles, rabbits, they don't have voices of their own, so we need to protect that, and we need to make sure and have this notion of responsible ownership. And if we don't, and if we have folks that violate that, then they need to pay the price.
We should touch on the horse issue. So right now down in downtown, there are horse-drawn carriages, which there's different sides of this. Some people think they need to be banned altogether. Some people think that, it's perfectly fine as it is.
business, yeah.
The thing is, though, is that they're currently violating ordinances that are already in place and just kind of, sloughing it off as it's not an issue. For instance, no clean water is being given. They're getting water out of like the fountains down at Aquarium.
Has chlorine in it.
Has chlorine in it. It's not, safe, healthy, or whatever. And then they've got sores on their legs, which, and it's so funny because we sat down with Greg Travis, and he, until someone brought it up to him, said, I work down right around the corner, and they're just not there whenever I'm ever driving by. I didn't even know that this was an issue. How do you think that we
I
can
didn't
address
either.
that?
So if there's ordinances in place, then we need to enforce them, and we need to make sure that they are enforced. And it's the same thing, when we see, bars along the Washington Avenue corridor, when we see the bars along White Oak Bayou. People are struggling.
Yeah.
You have a quality of life. There are ordinances in place, and maybe some that can be strengthened, but there's not the enforcement. And we need, as a city, we there's a reason why we have ordinances, and in this case, if animals are suffering, if they're given inopportune issues with chlorine, that's ridiculous.
And the reason they stated was, they said that it was too heavy to carry a container for it, but yet they had this big generator that weighed more than carrying enough fresh water for them to have the whole day.
Then they shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Plain and
See, the
simple.
thing is that animal control has been there. So I think it all does come down to being able to enforce these ordinances and, take away with the 24 hours.
More than just
Yeah.
a slap on the wrist,
Right.
because if they're making, if the slap on the wrist is what one ride would cost them, they don't.
And I understand, folks are shorthanded, police is shorthanded, animal control is shorthanded, but, the other thing that we can do is make sure that we partner together. We did that in HISD with law enforcement, and we actually did some unique partnerships with both Harris County, City of Houston, and HISD Police. There is no reason why we can't do that. This city should not feel like, hands off with the county. We're all in this together, so there's opportunities to really partner and cooperate, whether it's, issues like this or infrastructure issues where we can actually collaborate and coordinate efforts to make it a lot more efficient for folks.
We do have the task force here.
Yes.
And
They've done a lot in a little time.
They have.
increased charges filed by 200% since they started in just a year.
Right.
So I think that's one of the biggest things that we can do, and maybe get more citizens involved with that. Great.
Another thing that we've talked about before is, for instance, the area right around the Harris County Animal Shelter is actually BARC jurisdiction. What would be your suggestion as far as making it to where, would it just be, okay, let's redraw lines right around the Harris County Animal Shelter to where those ACOs are able to leave the shelter and pick up an animal? Or what would you suggest? What do you
Absolutely.
think?
First thing is I would want to understand why there's lines just drawn there when we have an issue that's plaguing us more. Is it a resource problem? Is it something that we need to invest more in?
Mm-hmm.
Is that why the lines are drawn so tightly? No, I would like to make sure that they have the opportunity to really go beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to make sure that there's an opportunity for folks to actually bring in animals more at a convenient time for the people rather than a convenient time for those working.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we need to meet people where they are, and if there's an animal that's on a Sunday, there has to be some opportunity for them to do the intake on a Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
So,
We looked at, I can't remember the exact stat off the top of my head, but I believe, don't quote me on this, I believe it was 70% of the animals that went into bark around there. It was 60 or 70% of the animals that went into bark last year were actually picked up by citizens, not by ACOs, which to me, I think that expanding intake hours, if you have someone that's doing the job of an ACO, I'm not talking about going to dump your personal pet, but if it's a stray, it's, to me, seems like it's cutting down on, the cost of the ACO having to go out, the 311 operator, all these different,
totally agree. I totally
just
agree.
opening those intake hours, it seems just like a misdistribution of, where resources could be better used.
Right. No, and we're seeing that, the city in the name of cost savings, as it relates to public safety. So one of the things they've done is they've actually let people go in some of the admin roles in Houston Police Department, and they put commissioned officers in there. That doesn't save money. And the other thing is it takes boots off the ground. So it goes to your point, Shelby, is in terms of the inefficiency, the lack of strategic focus that this city has in trying to broach some of these issues. We've got to stop, and we've got to take a strategic approach in terms of, again, what are the driving facets that is going to make this city better.
And then when we talk about animal welfare, I mean, we're not obviously just talking about dogs and cats. There's a lot of different organizations that also you deal with pigs and different animals. I think that's one of the things the city doesn't really realize, that there's resources for different, animals. And is there a way we can promote that and just really put more information out? Because a lot of people don't even know about the city shelter.
Right.
Which is
and it does. It comes to education. So I think, once you start getting out into some of these big forums, the other thing I've talked about, and I believe it was with Animal Justice League, as well as some of the super neighborhoods. So obviously, District C has over 70 neighborhoods, multiple super neighborhoods, right? Those types of opportunities where folks like you can come in and provide educational opportunities. The super neighborhoods are beautifully designed to where they can actually encapsulate and spread out that information amongst all the smaller surrounding communities. I think that'd be another great venue for an educational piece for our communities, to make sure that there are resources available. This is an issue that's plaguing us. What can you do? Or here's what you can do to help stem this issue.
I mean, it sounds like we can even have spay and neuter events there.
Absolutely.
You mentioned you went to one of the empty shelters?
I think I was asking if that's where you'd met some of the rescue community.
It's at various events, and I've jumped on, and I'm not the leading expert by any stretch. You guys are a tremendous resource, obviously.
We're only a resource because of
the community. And the first place that I would go if I was challenged would be all of y'all. This is the resource that we need to pull together, to make sure that, again, we stem this tide of where we are, because it's not getting better. And the more and longer we sit back with this inactivity, the worse it's going to get. And that hurts me. I know it hurts our communities to see this happening.
One thing that I think we talked about earlier is Nora sees all these different posts. So, rescuers, we know how many times we get tagged in things or we see posts on our Facebook feed. I appreciated the fact that you asked to be tagged on every stray dog in District C. So to me, though, that shows you want to see what we see, which somebody, I can't stress this enough, somebody that's willing to really, truly see things for what they are and are not just trying to sugarcoat it. I feel like a lot of people that are, I appreciate that.
No.
Is really my point.
But again, it goes towards the fact, and Nora, you're great. And don't stop, tagging me. Jennifer, you too, and all the other folks that
you're
are out there.
You're going to get tagged by the entire rescue community.
I love it. Because what it does, it builds my knowledge base, and it does. It provides a lens. I can't be everywhere, right? So it provides a lens with what everybody sees. And it makes, I think some of the things that I think of will help be shaped by what each and every one of y'all are going through on a daily basis. So that's huge for me. I don't want it to stop.
That'd be great. So would it be possible to have a group of representatives there on your council just for animal welfare?
Absolutely, absolutely. I would love that, and I would welcome that. And I've even, most of the questionnaires that I've answered, I would like to have a resource. You know, I'm not an engineer. I'm not a home builder. But when critical issues come up, you know, that folks are facing, whether it's, you know, the ridiculous permitting process in the city, whether it's, you know, the animal dumping that's out of control, whether it's cruelty issues that need to be stemmed. I mean, you all are the folks, in a universal sense, that I would go to make sure what is the best approach. And obviously there are other cities that are doing a heck of a better job than us, and that's a shame. You know, the third largest, the fourth largest, soon to be the third largest. I'm going to say the third because we'll probably pass Chicago. But right now, the fourth largest city, there's no excuse, for us to be in the position we're in.
I mean, especially the fact that we have to transport so many dogs out because we can't find them good homes here.
Yeah. So we ran the numbers for BARK, and just this year, for instance, the month of April, 80% of the total intake for BARK was transported through RPM. And then the live release weight was 90%. So that means only 10% of the animals were getting out via adoption. They were returned to owner, left with the foster program, passed away in the shelter, or I'm missing one other one. But euthanized is the other 10%, the top 10%. But we were, we knew that transport was a big factor as far as why the live release rate is what it is right now. I did not realize that there were months where 80% of the total number of animals going in BARK were leaving with RPM. That, to me, we're pushing the problem somewhere else.
I would totally agree. And, what was it, about a month ago, 3 weeks ago, we had the big adoption event, that needs to be spread out more. And the city needs to take an active role into making sure that we educate folks that these kind of resources are available for responsible pet owners. And that goes along with what you all are suggesting in terms of the animal cruelty registry, to make sure that folks that are adopting these animals, have a responsible have a safe background, number one, for the animals, and a responsible amount of ownership and responsibility when they begin to be owners.
I think one of the problems is if, say, for instance, you volunteer, I don't know with BARK, but if you're a volunteer and you do the adoption counseling at Harris County, you're not allowed to turn away an adopter, which to me, I know the big part of the rescue community goes, it's not that you're trying to get less people to adopt, but you've got to make sure that, there's some people that probably shouldn't have a pet.
Yeah, I would agree. And we've heard stories, multiple stories, where folks have adopted younger dogs, puppies, and so forth, and then they begin to get a little bit more higher maintenance, and then we dump them. Yeah. And that's an inexcusable act. And it's again, it goes towards education, it goes towards the microchipping to make sure that those that do that are held responsible.
I think that's such a big gap, because if it's a cruelty case or if they end up in the shelter or anything, if they're microchipped in, you can track it back to exactly where that dog came from.
Absolutely. So and we need to provide more opportunities. I know some of the vets and some of them are lower socioeconomic parts of town. We need to figure out how can we provide more resources for them to allow for free spay neutering. And I think that's another problem that we should look at. What other resources can we look at, whether it's grants, whether it's an investment, whether there's donors. I don't think we've begun to tap the wonderful philanthropy, here in Houston as it relates to anything. And those folks want a great Houston. They want a Houston that they can be proud of. That's where they give. And I think if this issue continues to be elevated, like I said, you guys, all of y'all, are doing a phenomenal job. I think you're going to begin to see the philanthropic community come in and say, we're here to help. What is it that we need to do in terms of additional spay neutering, additional microchip opportunities for some of the areas that can't afford it? What other areas do we need to do in terms of educational opportunities? So those are conversations that I would welcome and I would love to be part of with you guys.
I think we covered everything.
I think we covered a lot.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I'll tell you, people ask, do you talk about these issues because you're campaigning? No, this is my life. And, I have a track record. Dog, right? Absolutely. We have a track record of public service. I had an opportunity to serve for 12 years, and I can't hide from my record, nor do I want to. And so I'm proud. These are some of the things that I want to do. And, through the 12 years, there was not one time where I didn't converse with community on an active basis. Conversation is two-way. we had community meetings on a monthly basis. We advocated for certain issues, and we talked and educated community on things that were plaguing the school system. That's what I want.